Welcome back to VNN, your daily dose of Vietnamese news.
Today in our broadcast, we're going to bring you a special report about French imperialism in Vietnam.
We'll be looking at Vietnam from 1700 to 1914. Vietnam is growing into a formidable nation, but French colonialism and imperialism has resulted in its limited growth.
We'll try to distinguish the differences between the French colonizers and Vietnamese colonists, and how they view these significant events very differently.
Now, perhaps the most important part that was changed by the French was the Vietnamese government.
To present a French perspective, we will now introduce a French colonial governor who is ruling a portion of Vietnam for the French Empire with our reporter Safik on the spot.
Thanks, Trishna. Here we have a French governor, John. So, John, how do you govern your subjects?
Well, there's no coherent French policy, so I can govern them however I want, as long as I make the profits.
Okay, but how exactly do you govern your subjects?
As I said before, there's no coherent French policy, so we can do whatever we want, such as torture, bribery. However, to minimize revolts, we play Mandarins, religious groups, and communities against each other.
Okay, thank you, John. Now back to studio.
Thank you, Safik. That presented a point of view that we hardly see nowadays.
We will now introduce a Vietnamese commoner who presents the opposite point of view. Let's switch to our reporter on the spot, Surya.
Hello, I'm out here with a Vietnamese man named Mr. Sen. Do you feel that colonial rule has impacted your government?
I think it's definitely impacted our government in a negative way. These governors, they started coming in at first to help us with business and political differences, but it ended up they were doing terrible things and committing many sins.
What sins?
For one thing, they are abusive and power hungry. They assault our women and children, take away our freedoms and anything that we love. They don't even let ourselves call us by our names. Vietnam.
Wow, that's terrible. I feel so bad for you.
But it gets worse. These hypocrites tell us not to lie to them, but they lie to us. They take our money. They're nothing but a bunch of cheapos who want power from others.
Whoa, that's interesting. Now back to you, Chad.
Thanks, Surya. That was very enlightening. Now we understand more about the government from a Vietnamese perspective. Now we'll move on to social issues, something that affects all of us.
One good thing that the French did was open schools. However, these schools weren't quite good, were they, Chad?
Absolutely not. Although the Vietnamese people are given an education, it only teaches about French culture and French values, and how French culture is apparently better than everything else. Only die-hard supporters of the French can receive scholarships to study in France. Also, this education was only beneficial to the people who lived in cities, because peasants were ignored and were not given any sort of education.
Quite right. Another thing to mention are street names. As we see here, this street name doesn't sound very Vietnamese. It's French, in fact. The Vietnamese people now get confused because of these changes and can get lost very easily in their own towns and cities. However, the French argue that this provides organization to this new country.
Something else is that the French destroyed many temples and monuments and replaced them with French architecture, which the Vietnamese did not like. Now we go to a reporter on the scene of one of these new monuments to discuss them.
Thanks, Chad. As you can see behind me, there is a French monument called La Belle Principale, but this wasn't always here. Before this, there was a Buddhist religious statue, which many people admired. Now, back to the studio.
Thanks, Safik. Now we have a special interview with a special guest that Surya is going to report on.
We're here today with a Catholic bishop on his quest on making Vietnam great again. So, Mr. Bishop, what do you plan on doing?
Well, I plan on promoting the correct religion, the right one, which is obviously Christianity. These people are practicing Hinduism, Buddhism, and Confucianism, and it's not okay. We need to promote Christianity today.
So would destroying Buddhist and Hindu temples be a part of your action?
Well, of course it would. It's as simple as these statues are promoting the incorrect way to pray. What we need to do is we have to put up more Catholic and French architecture, which is much better intellectually and just in every way than these horrid statues and sculptures.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Now back to the studio.
Thanks, Surya. Well, that's one way to look at it, but Vietnamese people don't like that the French have slowly been destroying their culture nowadays that they have been practicing for over a millennium. Isn't that, Chad?
Sure is, Krishna. Now let's talk about the economic effect of French imperialism in Vietnam.
The economy was greatly affected through French imperialism in Vietnam.
Just like many other aspects in Vietnam that were changed because of the French imperialism, economy is a huge topic with the variety of conflicts that arise. Now, many workers complain about how they are not working for themselves, but rather they are working for the benefit of the French Empire. The French, on the other hand, instead believe that they are modernizing Vietnam by first starting a capitalist economy, which the Vietnamese can later build upon. Our reporter Satvik on the spot has a great example of this, so let's swing it over to him.
Thanks, Chad. Here we are in Bru, Vietnam, with a boss and his worker. The new capital system has really brought out different viewpoints among different people. We're gonna go interview them right now. All right, Josh, I hear that you're a worker on this plantation. Do you have to say anything about this new system?
Well, this new capitalist society is really not good for me or my family. I'm now working twice as hard, getting paid less than half as much, which is making it troublesome for me, my family, and my friends. And my boss, John, over there, is doing nothing to help us. Instead, he's reaping all the benefits from our hard labor.
Wow, that was a promising argument. Well, John, what do you have to say about that?
Well, frankly, I really don't care about my workers, because that's what a capitalist society is. We reap all the benefits because the poorer get poorer and the richer get richer. I'm making so much money because of these plantations and because of opium trades.
Josh, what do you have to say about this?
Well, because of him, I'm now having to pay for my own food that I'm harvesting myself, which is making it a lot harder for my family to eat and just for me to support them, buy a house, buy everything that we need.
Well, you really don't know what you're talking about, because the government regulates these prices to help Indochina grow and to provide for its future. You should be happy for this.
Wow, these are some major conflicting arguments. Now back to you, Chad.
That was very insightful. Thank you, Satvik.
The daily life of the Vietnamese have been greatly influenced by environmental factors of Vietnam, as the burning of coal and the use of factories has deteriorated Vietnamese culture and lifestyle.
The economy of France was significantly impacted by its occupation of Vietnam, but the economy was based on the hard work of the poor and oppressed Vietnamese workers, so it is important to explore their daily lives.
People's lifestyles, education quality, and jobs were all changed because of the French rules and regulations.
Compared with French living quality, the Vietnamese lived in worse conditions after French colonialism, which is a major argument that the Vietnamese present.
Satvik is standing by to talk to a wealthy French citizen, Akshat Pierre, about how he views daily life in Vietnam.
Thank you, Chad. Here we have a French businessman. So, Akshat, how are you doing today?
Bonjour, I'm doing well. I just came back from my monthly healthcare check with my personal family doctor, and I'm about to go eat lunch at the high-class restaurant, Gustave's, down the street.
So, Akshat, how do you think the French living style compares to living conditions in colonies such as Vietnam?
Well, I think that every time France is involved, colonies like, what'd you say, Vietnam? Sorry, there's so many French colonies, it's hard to remember all of them. Well, I think that the industrialization of Vietnam has probably benefited, and that the overall quality of life is probably better because of France being involved.
So, what do you think about the French reducing the education quality and increasing taxes for the poor people in Vietnam?
I don't know. It's probably for the better, and these taxes are probably being used for the betterment of the Vietnamese.
No, I'm pretty sure these taxes are used for the benefit for the French instead of the Vietnamese.
Well, I don't know. Taxes are probably being used for the betterment of these. I mean, hurry it up. I gotta go eat lunch with my business partner.
Are you a worker and missing something in your life? Are you tired of working all day and coming back home just to be depressed and bored? Well, then you should try opium. Opium will make you feel 10 times better with no side effects, guaranteed. Just ask for this loyal customer in Vietnam.
Dude, this opium is so lit.
We provide you with the best opium because of our French imperialism in Vietnam and the finest workers get you the finest opium you'll ever see, in the safest conditions possible. Our opium is the best and provides your Vietnamese working life with a little bit of relief now and then. Try opium today.
Yes, I'm out here in Vietnam, and I just recently talked with a commoner about what this place originally was. It was once a great and lush forest until the French people came and modernized this area. For example, they created new road systems and buildings like this one. These road systems and buildings were created through deforestation by the French. The Vietnamese people are angry because the French are manipulating the land and ruining their society. But the French argue that this is for modernization
Thank you, Surya.
rather than deforestation.
From this, it is clearly visible to see that after French colonization, Vietnamese environment has been deteriorated. But what do you think the French will say about this, Chad?
It is obvious that the French would disagree about the fact that colonization of Vietnam has destroyed Vietnam's environment, but they would most likely use the excuse of advancement of technology. It is true, however, that without French colonization of Vietnam, advanced road systems would not exist here. Now that we've talked about the environment and how the other nations have been taking advantage of Vietnamese natural resources, we switch to the international relations of Vietnam with some history involved.
Throughout the 19th century, France was heavily involved in Vietnam under the pretext of protecting the work of Catholic missionaries in the country.
Eventually in 1884, during the time of Vietnam's Nguyen dynasty, Qing China and France fought a war which ended in a Chinese defeat. The resulting Treaty of Tien Tsin recognized French dominance over Vietnam and Indochina.
This was the end of formal Chinese influence on Vietnam and the beginning of Vietnam's French colonial period.
Thus, because of French intervention in Vietnamese affairs, China is now an enemy of Vietnam, and Vietnam is under the authority of the French.
The Vietnamese people do not appreciate either outcome, as China was a trade partner with them before, and the French now oppress them to no end. One important thing that we most definitely should explain now is how new classes and nationalities formed because of French imperialism.
To start off, after France first colonized Vietnam, a huge population called the Hoa people gained more importance in Vietnam.
The Hoa population were a Chinese class that existed before the French actually colonized Vietnam, who controlled foreign and domestic trade. The French have now enforced this Hoa population to manage commerce. The Vietnamese people are iffy on this topic, but they want more control of their rightfully acquired country.
Along with this class, the working class of Vietnam has increased dramatically because of the French imperialism, which in turn presents rights conflicts and is hard for the Vietnamese.
Now to talk about another major group that is formed in Vietnam, we will swing it over to Safik.
Thanks, Krishna. Now we're going to be talking with a blue-collar member of Vietnam so we can discuss about his problems with being in this group. So, Akshat, how do you feel about being in this group?
Yes, the French administered 3 separate provinces over Vietnam. There's Tonkin in the north, Annam in the central, and Cochin China in the south. All of these places are administered differently. There's no national authority or complete government over Vietnam. Servant! Oh, my master realizes I'm gone. I have to get back before he punishes me very badly for talking with you. Bye.
Wow, no national identity, huh? Now back to the studio.
This makes a lot of sense and is truly very sad for those blue-collar workers and different groups of people in Vietnam. Now we move it over to Chad to wrap this special segment up.
Thank you, Krishna. In our time here, we have learned so much about Vietnam and the various perspectives on things that exist here. In fact, as the chaos ensues here, it is a direct result of French imperialism over Vietnam, or as it is commonly known, Indochina. As we stand here in this Vietnamese and developed landscape, it is a solemn reminder to us all of the problems that Vietnam still has to face every single day. It is my hope that one day, by us raising awareness of these problems, they will one day be fixed and resolved, either by changing the Vietnamese perspective or by changing the French perspective. Well, that's it today for our special segment on French imperialism over Vietnam. We hope to see you again sometime, right here on VNN.